Hello and welcome to our 7th video, also the 7th lesson of the Kufi Israel course. It won't keep the book in there. There you go. Oh, for a split second it worked. Today we're going to be discussing in chapter 7, page 86, the development of modern Zionism. And because this lesson and lesson 8 is pretty short, we're going to cover them both in this video. So follow along. If you don't have this course just yet, go to kufi.org to order it. I believe it's $20 for just one book, but if you decide to cover this course, church, Sunday school, youth groups, for fun, you name it, the more you purchase, the bigger the discount you get. So today's learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to summarize the Dreyfus affair and its influence on Theodor, Herzl, speak about the development of Zionism as a major political movement, and express your understanding of the waves of Aliyah to Israel. Before we begin, prepare your mind and heart to absorb important historical information and be determined to see the deeper significance of the beginning stages of the greatest miracle of our time, the rebirth of Israel as a modern nation. Alrighty. Over the past few lessons, we've learned a lot. We've discussed the origins of the Jewish people, their covenant with God, and their deep connection to the land of Israel. We've also learned about modern Israeli society, its values, its commitment to minority rights, as well as its social innovation and impact on the world. We also learned that the vast majority of Jews were exiled from the land of Israel for thousands of years, and that the modern state of Israel is only a few decades old. We've learned that Israel has fought wars and terrorism over the course of its brief existence. We know you have questions about how Israel came into being, what those conflicts look like, and how they impact you as a Christian with a heart for Israel. Over the course of the next several lessons, we're going to learn about modern Israel's history, and we'll discover together why it's so important that we know this history. Part 1.
This is something that they could go and actually look up in books and things other than the Bible. So if you're like, I don't know, this is something you can do on your own time. And it's like, knowledge. I think we said in a previous video, the truth of God goes throughout all sciences, histories, everything. So this is just another proof that the truth will come throughout any subject from any area that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this is video number 7. Videos 1 through 6, we shared a lot of scripture. We shared a lot of debate, a lot of videos, a lot of discussion and talk. And for those that grasp that and believe the word of God and take it to heart, this is just a further history of Israel as a state and how it came into being during the 18 and 1900s and became and it's a state, basically. So all those many books that you'll see us referencing in video number 1 and video number 2, go get those too, right? Anyways, at the bottom of page 6, it starts with part 1. Zionism Ascendant. As we know, the Jewish people's dream to return to Israel was kept alive through thousands of years of exile. Even though the Jewish people were dispersed around the globe, returning to Israel was in their thoughts constantly, exhibited in their prayers, liturgy, and celebrations. While there were always Jewish enclaves in what is now known as Israel, and Jews did move to Israel throughout the centuries, the ability for Jews to think seriously about returning to their land en masse did not arise until the 1800s. In the beginning of the 19th century, there were at least 10,000 Jews living in their ancient homeland under the rule of the Ottoman Turks. The 19th century was a time of incredible upheaval in Europe. New political ideals regarding nationalism and liberalism emerged, changing the status of Jews in European lands. For centuries, Jews in Europe had been at the mercy of each nation's majority. Often they were forced into ghettos and shunned by society. Jews' ability to work freely was restricted, and their lives were often at risk due to rampant anti-Semitism fueled by unjust suspicion, and Jewish communities developed tight-knit communities in an effort to preserve their way of life and religious practices. So already we see in the 19th century ideals that America were founded on: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? The freedom to find a job, work hard, build your community, provide for your family. Jews in Europe at that time in the 19th century, they were forced into ghettos, shunned by society, and their ability to work freely was restricted. And they were constantly, it says, under suspicion because they just wanted to preserve their way of life and religious practices. So to me, it's just a constant juxtaposition of, the first people that came over from England to settle in the new land for religious freedom so that they could practice their Christianity the way that they wanted to without the, rule and oppression of the government, the King of England at the time. So I'm just constantly seeing how the United States and the beginning of the United States is just kind of a precursor to the beginning of Israel as a state. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, you can't preserve your own histories and your own culture and your own, especially what the Bible has given them directives and how they live every single aspect of their life out. You can't become one with the nation that you're in. I mean, throughout the Bible, we've seen that happen. And then they stepped outside of the blessing side of things and entered into the cursing. So I can understand why they're like, this is the way we do things. This is the way you do things. Let us do we'll live our life and you guys live your life and just be at peace with it, but it creates suspicion. And since that suspicion boils up from not enough knowledge, not enough understanding, and just flat out fear because of fear of the unknown. But all that can be stopped and avoided if you just have open conversation and dialogue, So it's just, history repeats.
Yeah, it's history, but it's also love your neighbor as yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like if you could just love your neighbor as yourself. I don't want to sound like one of those. Remember in Miss Congeniality when all the contestants get up there and they're like, if you had one wish, world peace, world peace. That's like it the whole time, right? But it's just like, who cares? I mean, yes, okay, it's important what you do on the weekends, right? Like, I forgot who it was. There's a quote that I read like when I was barely 20. Who was it? I don't remember, but I remember it said, measure not men by Sundays, but what they do all the week after. And so it's like, okay, just because you don't know or understand the way a person is practicing their religion doesn't mean that you can just judge them, shun them, kill them, blame everything on them, and like force them out of your town. That's stupid and it's evil, in my opinion. Now, if you're like a devil worshiper and, into witchcraft and cursing people and sacrificing animals to Satan and things like that, okay. But no, this is the beginning of, Christianity here. This is like, Old Testament, and everybody had a Bible and just read the first half of it. They know exactly why the Jews separate themselves from the nations in order to practice their religion. So, yeah. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is something that the Jews have not had for, I dare say, thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going into a nation and you obey those nations' laws and you're not breaking any laws, you're not hurting anybody else, then just like America, you're free to do whatever. But once you enter in and you don't follow the rules set out by the federal and the state and this county and the city, then we have every right to, say you don't belong here or you need to get it together, and then you can acclimate. But the Jews never did this. They came in, they obeyed, they made things better, they made things more beautiful, they made things more healthier and everything. Yeah. So, I mean, they were bankers, they were seamstress, they were all these, bakers. They held every job everybody else did, and they followed the rules and the laws, and they should be left alone, and rightfully so. So,
yeah. Which is funny because, like, exactly right when we get into the very next chapter, it basically says what we're kind of talking about now when it comes to, how America started and the ideas that America was founded on. Little bit here it says, and we're on page 87, the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity popularized in the American and French revolutions freed Jews from their ghettos. In this new era, Jews could live freely as members of their states, assimilating into society and entering professions previously forbidden. Like, who are you to forbid somebody from working in a specific field or profession? Like, however, liberalism was soon followed by the development of nationalism, which demanded support and adherence to the interests of one's own nation. In this viewpoint, Jews were seen as other and not able to be part of, for instance, the German nation, as their Jewishness precluded Germanness. We say it too, God, family, country. And in this case, nationalism is country, God, family. It's like country first. No. God, family, country. Some Jews decided that if they rejected their Jewishness, they would be able to join their host societies. However, despite the arc of history bending towards additional freedom, anti-Semitism remained a major factor governing life for Jews in Europe. And yet, the development of nationalism raised the consciousness of many Jews throughout Europe, who, after thousands of years of being a people without a land, began thinking about ways to realize their own right to a homeland. These ideas began to crystallize in the wake of the Dreyfus affair of 1894, in which a French Jewish army officer was wrongly accused and convicted of selling French military secrets. So, we're getting ready to watch two videos about the Dreyfus affair. Some questions to kind of think about as we're watching it. Who was Alfred Dreyfus? What made him unique? What happened to him? What did the Dreyfus affair show? Who was Theodor Herzl? What was the impact of the Dreyfus affair on him? And what was Der Judenstaat? And what was its core point?
In 1894, a French military officer named Alfred Dreyfus was accused of passing military secrets to Germany. Obscure and unknown, Dreyfus was singled out as a suspect simply because he was Jewish. After being convicted in a secret trial in which Dreyfus pled innocent and was not allowed to examine the evidence against him, Dreyfus was stripped of his rank and shipped to a remote island in South America for life imprisonment. A few individuals came forward to demonstrate Dreyfus's innocence, but they were silenced. Many were outraged by this false accusation, wrongful conviction, and subsequent cover-up. Eventually, Dreyfus was pardoned and then exonerated. Nonetheless, the event had a significant impact on a young man named Theodor Herzl. He became convinced that anti-Semitism was always going to threaten Jews and keep them from being fully protected citizens in their countries of residence. Thus, Herzl wrote about the need for a Jewish state in Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state. He envisioned a homeland where Jews could live their lives without constant fear. Later, with help from Christian pastor Reverend Heschler, Herzl lifted the idea of a Jewish national homeland from obscurity into the political discourse among world leaders. Today, he is considered the founder of modern Zionism.
The fact that they didn't allow him to testify and view his own, like, the paper that they said he wrote, whatever is evidence, to me denotes that even the people who put on this mock trial, the thing, knew who was the one who did it. Like,
Absolutely.
even yeah, this came from higher up. This was a cover-up to protect someone higher up, because there's no court actually after truth and justice who would do such a thing. You know, this is just like a demonic attack against an innocent man. And it was just wicked. And the fact that they said he was, you know, found innocent and exonerated, how large of an exoneration was that? Was that done behind closed doors, or did they actually pull out the city of Paris or whatever and say, you all, you know, the 20,000 people or whatever that was standing out here before, you all need to apologize? Or was it just like, here you go, hey, we were wrong, oh, okay.
Yeah, just pushed him out the prison doors was like, or was this a large apology and the same size that people, you know, spewed vitriol at him were the ones to say we suck and then actually apologize. Yeah, I wonder, we're gonna have to look I want to look more into that and figure out what that is. But if you want to pick up reading on page 88.
Yeah. This event rattled a young man named Theodor Herzl. He became convinced that anti-Semitism was always going to threaten Jews and to keep them from being fully protected citizens, as we watched in the video. Thus, Herzl wrote on the need for a Jewish state in Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state. He envisioned a homeland that was similar to the state of Sweden, multilingual and multinational, but where Jews could live their lives and practice Judaism without constant fear. To make this dream a reality, Herzl organized the first Zionist Congress in Switzerland in 1897. The Congress had 200 participants from 17 different countries, vigorously debating on various strands within what had become to be known as Zionism. The Congress concluded with the establishment of the World Zionist Organization and with the articulation of the Basel Program, quote, that Zionism seeks for the Jewish people a publicly recognized, legally secured homeland in Palestine. So here we can read this section. Meet Reverend Heschler, Herzl's friend, a Christian pastor named Reverend William Henry Herschel, played an influential role in supporting the vision of a modern Jewish nation state in the land of Israel. Heschler wrote a pamphlet advocating for the establishment of the Jewish state as the place promised by God to belong to the Jewish people forever as their rightful homeland. He used his social connections to introduce Herzl to members of German Royal Society and the Sultan of Turkey during the late 1800s, and he helped lift Herzl's idea of a Jewish national homeland from obscurity into the political discourse among world leaders. And we can learn more about this relationship between Reverend Heschler and Theodor Herzl, as well as their influence on Zionism in Q-Fi's primer, titled Reverend Heschler, Theodor Herzl, and Modern Zionism, found at the end of the lesson. Wasn't it like he went to like the German Royal Society, or was it that guy? I know I need to read more on it, but he was like, well, I agree with you, but I'm not going to start it. And then they got some other guys to agree to like get the program going or whatever they needed to do. And then, you know, these monarchies joined in on it.
Yeah, I think it's on page 92. It might cover who actually was like the one to say, okay, I believe you, I stand with you, but I don't know that the people are going to, kind of a thing. Because I mean, there's a whole book on this relationship in the beginning of Zionism, and I believe it's in billybrim.org in her bookstore where you can purchase it.
Yeah.
But it was my understanding that he went to tons of world leaders and political men and women, and they were like, nope, not interested. And then finally, one guy, it was like this cousin of somebody or other that was royalty was finally like, okay, yeah, let's do this. But
I find it funny. The Sultan of Turkey.
Yeah. Considering what's going on right now in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look more into and to have with further study. You want to continue reading? Page 89?
Yeah. Part 2, Jews under threat. While in Western Europe, Jews experienced some of the benefits of emerging liberalism. Concurrently, the Jews of Eastern Europe began to experience more restrictions. In the late 1800s, there were approximately 5 million Jews living in poverty in Eastern Europe. These Ashkenazi Jews who spoke Yiddish first came to then Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, also known as the Kingdom of Poland, for shelter from persecution in the 13th century. They prospered initially until the kingdom was carved out between Prussia, Austria, and Russia. Jews fell under the Russian rule and were unwanted. They were expelled from the cities with major populations into settlements. They lived in shtetls, communities made up entirely of Jews. Shtetl life was, despite its constraints, rich and vibrant communities and were structured around Jewish values, containing a synagogue, schools, social welfare associations, as well as a market where people could sell crops and wares and trade with non-Jews. These relatively small market towns in Russia and Poland, ranging in size from a few hundred to several thousand residents, were not composed of individualists. The Yiddish word kahal represents the outlook and priorities of most Jews living in the shtetls at that time.
Shtetl is a Yiddish word for a small town. It's pronounced shtetl. Yiddish was the main language of the Jews of Eastern Europe and is a combination of German, Russian, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Slavic languages. As with all languages, Yiddish has its own unique rhythms, nuance, and history. Primarily spoken by Ashkenazi Jews, Yiddish is still spoken by a few million Jews around the world today. So we're going to watch a quick video on what is Yiddish. Cute. All right.
I think I've heard all of those, but I always think I hear like a word that I shouldn't be using, and then I don't use it because I think it's like I've mixed it up with another bad word or something. I was like, I don't know if that's a bad word or not.
Or we say it because we've heard other people say it, and it just has become a part of our language that we don't realize what it actually really means or comes from. And then you find out it's kind of a dirty word, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be using that. Like, I think one of them was schmuck. Like, if you look at the real like definition of schmuck, it's not a good word, but we use it whenever, because I mean, always in movies when the guys are in New York, you know, and you get these New Yorkers talking, and they're like, "You schmuck," and then you look up the definition, you're like, I shouldn't be saying that. Sorry if that's a curse word, but it's just like movies, especially. And like that lady we were talking earlier about that, the actress Mayim, what's her last name? Balik. She, on her podcast kind of interview shows, she loves to showcase a Yiddish word on every show that she does. And she will ask her Jewish guests, like I saw her talking to Ben Stiller one time. She was like, "What's your favorite Yiddish word?" Like things that his parents and, you know, grandparents or family members used around him all the time, like growing up. And it's just super cute. Yeah. Anyways. The next 3 questions or I guess 4 questions on page 90 are questions to kind of think about while we're reading the next several paragraphs. So I think I'll read these because they don't have any of the tongue-tied words, and I'll give you a break. So I'll give the tongue-tying words that are on page 92 and 93 to you. So page 90 under Think It Over. Why were Jews living in shtetls? What was life like for shtetl Jews in Eastern Europe? What were the Jewish values exhibited in shtetl life? And what dangers for Jews existed during this time frame? The liberal reforms of Western Europe did not reach Eastern Europe. However, there were some minimal gains in rights under the reign of Alexander II, with serfs being freed from bondage and anti-Jewish laws going relatively unenforced. This changed in 1881. Alexander II was assassinated, and his successor, Alexander III, took power. Alexander III enacted the May Laws, which restricted where Jews could live. Forced conscription of Jewish boys at age 12 into the military for 25 years became common, as did pogroms, violent attacks on shtetls and communities that were silently supported by the Russian authorities. Okay. Hold up. Okay. We both have 2 children, right? And my oldest, 13, my youngest, 10. Over my dead body. Would anyone conscript my son into the military and take him away for 25 years? Heck no. Like, prison break.
A lot of parents felt, and that's probably exactly what happened.
Well, and if you think about Jewish culture, that's 1 year before a bar mitzvah, right? That's like 1 year before them coming of age and becoming a man in this like really big
Celebration,
ceremonious party. And for your son to get ripped out of your home and thrown into the military for 25 years. And not only that, these pogroms, there are violent attacks on shtetls and communities that were supported. Violent attacks, like, it's one thing to just have some jerk faces come and attack your businesses and your homes and like destroy your property, but then just take your children away from you. I'm only laughing right now because the rage it's just like burning inside of me, this like righteous indignation, like, angel of the Lord. God, please call for blood on the doorpost and let your angel go wipe them out like the Egyptians. Like, oh my gosh. Give me liberty or give me death over my dead body. Oh my goodness. Let's move on. In response, Jews began to flee Russia. Over a period of 30 years, nearly 2.25 million Jews left Russia for America. Good. Woo. I'm just gonna focus. Zionism also took hold. Societies sprang up throughout Russia to foster the establishment of an immigration to the Jewish homeland. Leon Pinsker, a Jewish physician who had previously believed that Jews would achieve social parity if they assimilated, authored a pamphlet called Auto-Emancipation in 1882, arguing that Judeophobia would only be vanquished if the Jews had their own state. Thousands of idealistic young Jews set sail for the historic land of Israel from Eastern Europe, and with other Jewish immigrants from Yemen began purchasing land from the Ottoman Empire and setting up farming collectives known as moshevot in harsh and demanding conditions. This period from 1883 to 1903 is known as the First Aliyah. Now, didn't we see in a previous lesson like a picture of a bunch of people standing around like in the desert, and it was talking about how they went and purchased like plots of land that was like literally just desert, like, or maybe that wasn't this.
There's one on 97 and page 98 in the next section.
Yeah, I thought we kind of maybe discussed that, or maybe it was in one of the Kufi micro histories that we were watching, but it was like they literally went and just bought up land and they didn't care. It was like they were just looking for a place to live, and it was actually
out there, I think.
Yeah, on page 91, it's just a bunch of people standing out in the desert and just sand. Tel Aviv was founded on land purchased from Bedouins. This photograph is of a 1909 auction of the first lots. They're literally just standing on a sand dune. Mm-hmm. It looks like. And that's how you know that the land is theirs, because when the Jews are not in the land is
barren.
But as soon as the Jews started coming back to the land, they turned this barren, ugly desert with no life. God blessed it and caused life to grow and to form. And not only was it just like, I mean, we were listening to that story of the lady that had the greenhouse in Gaza before, who was prime minister at that time? Mm-hmm. Sharon gave up Gaza. And it was like, they were literally growing vegetables out of sand, but it was like the most flavorful, like perfect, wasn't it celery or something that Billy Brim had tasted? And it was like the best tasting celery. And this lady said, this Jew that was running this greenhouse said that people from all over, like all these chefs from all over Europe, order fruits and vegetables from their greenhouse because it just tastes amazing. That's what happens when the Jews go to their land. God blesses it and the land can begin to prosper again. But when you take the Jews out of the land just becomes a waste. So,
well, and that's why we're able to purchase the land so easily, because nobody wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, they're buying it from the Ottoman Empire, and they're buying it from Bedouins, and they're buying it for people who are just like, I'll make money off of sand, you know. And so,
well, it just reminds me of Oklahoma, because we heard about this all growing up. It's a part of Oklahoma history, right? The settlers on the east coast of the United States decided that they were going to kick out, the Native Americans from the colonies because they found gold, in the Carolinas and things like that. And so we have the Trail of Tears, which is just god awful, horrible, and just hateful. And we can get into that whole political debate. But they made all of these tribes, and tribes that were enemies, didn't matter. They just moved all of these tribes on the Trail of Tears, trekked them all the way to Oklahoma and dumped them in this no man's land, and didn't really think anything of it. But then hundreds of years later, come to find out this land is rich with oil. And now a lot of the Native American tribes in Oklahoma are so rich because of the oil. It's just like, so selfish, it's selfish of any nation or any people to punish another nation, but God is faithful. And so even though it seems like punishment, he's going to bless them wherever they go, and he's going to make up for the wrongs that were done to them. So just kind of reminds me of that too.
That movie just came out with, it's a Scorsese movie with Leonardo DiCaprio about the flowers and the Osage moon or something like that. Flowers. And it's specifically about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was watching, too, commentary that it should have been more of a viewpoint from the Native Americans in the Osage, wasn't it? Wasn't it about the Osage in Osage County?
Well, he was going to write it about the FBI going to investigate what was happening, but once he went, Scorsese went, he did make it more about the Indians.
Yeah, but it wasn't from the main character being a Native American. It was Leonardo DiCaprio who was in love with a Native American, or pretended to be in love. I haven't even seen the movie, but yeah, not interested in seeing it myself. But yeah, it's like, okay, we don't like you. We're going to dump you here. You cause it to prosper. And find out that it's actually nice land. And now we're going to try to rip it out of your hands again.
Well, and there is also part of the history of, the natives had to come or write all the paperwork to make Oklahoma a state, but kept getting passed over until they got a group of white guys to go and be like, hey, put this forth for a statehood. And then they get their paperwork just like that. So it's just like, yeah. But out of all the nations and all the peoples that have had discrimination, most definitely the Israelites, the Jewish people, are reigning number one place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. There's not one nation I don't think that has not had some form of discrimination. The Irish, the Italians, the Spanish, the Middle Eastern, all the different Middle Eastern ones.
The Chinese, when they came to America too. Just thinking about America, and then, Asian countries dissing Asian countries, and parts of Russia and Ukraine hating each other once that split happened. It was just even in Africa, just genocide right and left. So it's not only different cultures hating different cultures, but it's your own people hating your own family. It's just the devil and its wickedness just rears its ugly head in all of these different forms, but it all stems from hate. That's where it all stems. Love your neighbor as yourself, or else. That's kind of how I feel. Okay. All right, so the first Aliyah, that's where we got. Okay, so the decade following from 1904 to 1914 saw an additional 40,000 Jews immigrate from Eastern Europe in the wake of even more discrimination and deadly pogroms. Life was challenging. The effects of climate, disease, Arab resistance to immigration, Turkish taxation, and the inexperience of many of the immigrants themselves contributed to the failure of many of the new collectives. One of the communal success stories of this period was the founding and development of Tel Aviv, the first all-Jewish city in modern memory. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the emergence of a Jewish nationalist consciousness and the beginnings of the establishment of modern Israel. Jewish communities were galvanized by the larger forces at work in the world, including anti-Semitism, nationalism, and liberalism. Herzl's Der Judenstaat, the World Zionist Congress, and the waves of Aliyah from Eastern Europe set the stage for what was to come, the modern rebirth of the Jewish nation in its ancestral homeland. And so next we're going to read Kufai's primer, Reverend Heschler Theodor Herzl and Zionism, on page 92 and 93.
Well, that also brings up to mind, like you were talking about the tribes coming, at least the 5 tribes. I'm sure there was bits more, but
lots more, because it was just 5 civilized tribes. that helped. But I've heard of so many, like that was a great period of unity for the tribes, because even warring tribes were meant to live together and to face this march across the United States, you know, from the East Coast to like Oklahoma, thousands of miles. What was that, 1,500 miles, or close to maybe 1,700 miles they had to march through the seasons, you know, winter, and oh my gosh. And so I read stories of how these warring tribes, that's when they came together and unified for like this one purpose and goal, and like this against this one enemy. So who knows how well they existed once they actually got to Oklahoma, but and how they assimilated. But yeah, go ahead and continue. What were your thoughts about that march?
To say rude, no. That, you know, when there's so much attack from outside forces, you have to get together. Like those tribes had to get together. So the tribes of Israel got together in unity, and that's when they're at their strongest. The first Americans had to get together in unity because they had to rely on each other. I believe there's like 101 recognized tribal languages in Oklahoma. So I know there were more than the 5 civilized, but it's like you were saying, one side is hate and discourse, and the other side is love and unity. As long as you're in love and unity, you'll always be stronger than the rest. So I was just brought up.
What's the Psalms? How wonderful it is to come together when brothers come together in unity. We sang it. Hinema tovu manayim shevekim gam yachad. I wrote it down. Actually, let's see where that's at. I have it in my notes because I like singing that Psalms. Hinema tovu manayim shevekim gam yachad. Yeah, 133. It's Psalm 133, 1. Hine matov uma naim shevet achim gam yachad. How good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Which, I mean, in light of what's going on, has happened in Israel here as of the last month, because we've come up onto like the 1 month mark, a couple days past now. I forgot who they interviewed, but it was someone with Hamas. Maybe it was someone they captured that was with Hamas. They said that the protests that Israel was having in the streets prior to the election and Benjamin Netanyahu winning that election, the protesting is what signaled the enemy to say, they're not in unity together, now's the time to attack. So that was the key point in which they decided to start planning the attacks. And so now this enemy has brought, I mean, it's disgusting, it's vile, it's wicked, it's evil what they're doing. But if we can pick out one silver lining, one positive in all this ugly, it would be that Israel is unified. One goal, to defeat their enemy.
Yeah. So, and not to lose sight of that.
And not what?
And not to lose sight of that. Do not lose sight of that unity. It's kind of like, I can fight with my brother and sister, but you can't. Like, you don't come pick on my brother and sister. You don't do that. But we can't have that. We got to have full unity and strengthen in that unity for sure.
Mm-hmm. So even after the enemy is squashed, stick together. Stick together. Yeah. Stick together. And I probably did not pronounce any of that correctly, but you get what I'm saying. 133:1. All right, we are on page 92, bringing up the end of this lesson. And because lesson 8 is so short, we're going to cover that as well. trying to keep these videos short, but 2 hours just seems to be well, what we're going to be dealing with. So take it away, Katie. Let's see how well you're able to not get tongue-tied here.
On page 92, we have a journal head out. So things to think about as we read this Q5 primer. How did Reverend Heschler's theological beliefs influence his view of the Jews and Zionism? How does Reverend Heschler's persistence say, what does Reverend Heschler's persistence say about his beliefs, and how is he an example for Christians today? So after nearly 2 millennia in exile in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a new movement for Jewish sovereignty began to gain worldwide traction, Zionism. In 1896, Theodor Herzl's Zionist pamphlet, Der Judenstaat, laid out a vision that would eventually culminate in the rebirth of the State of Israel. Herzl believed he had an answer to the never-ending problem of anti-Semitism and persecution faced by Jewish people wherever they found themselves throughout history, a safe haven for Jews in their ancient homeland, the land of Israel. Because of his tireless work, Zionism gained political legitimacy, and Herzl's friend, a pastor named Reverend Herzl, played an influential role in supporting Herzl's vision of a modern Jewish nation state in the land of Israel. I think we get tongue-tied because these sentences are so long. You're like,
you called it Herschler instead of Herzl and Heschler.
Yeah.
You said Herschler.
Longest sentence. So I'm like, where's the inflection going? What am I saying?
I think we should combine their names, like Bradgelina or whatever, just call them.
Or just say respectfully, Mr. Theodor and Mr. Reverend. Or
Theodor and William. Theodor and William, because Herzl and Heschler and Herschel. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. my elementary speech impediment is coming forward to the front. Okay. So Reverend William Henry, who was an Anglican clergyman with deeply rooted beliefs in the future restoration of the Jewish people, was already an avid Zionist involved in activism on behalf of the Jewish people before meeting Herzl. That's like the longest sentence. Having developed a love for the Jewish people early on in his life and career, the Reverend took every chance he received to expand his knowledge of the Jews and what was then called Palestine. In 1881, in his position as the Metropolitan Secretary of the Church Pastoral Aid Society, the Reverend visited Russia, Germany, and France, and he also investigated the situations of the Jews living there. The Reverend was particularly disgusted by the widespread pogroms in Russia. Stopping in Constantinople, the Reverend attempted to deliver a letter against anti-Semitism, proposing that the Jews be permitted to return to Palestine with a state of their own. This was from the Queen of England to the Sultan of Turkey through the British ambassador, who refused to deliver it. At that time, Palestine was under Ottoman rule. 3 years later, in 1884, the Reverend wrote a treatise entitled The Restoration of the Jews to Palestine, in which he called for the Jews to return to Palestine. He advocated for the establishment of the State of Israel as a place promised by God to the Jewish people forever as their rightful homeland. One day in 1896, the Reverend, who is a voracious reader, happened upon the recently published Der Judenstaat by Theodor Herzl. Herzl had been assigned to the cover of the 1894 trial of Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish French military officer wrongly convicted of selling France's military secrets to Germany. Dreyfus was chosen by authorities to take the fall. Yeah, there you go. That's what we're talking about. He was chosen by authorities to take the fall. So they knew about it. That's why that trial was a farce. For the act of treason solely because he was Jewish. As a result, Herzl became convinced that the only way for the Jewish people to survive was ultimately thrive was to have a state of their own. He was convicted and convinced, so he did something about it. He wrote, quote, "I believe that I understand anti-Semitism, which is really a highly complex movement. I consider it from a Jewish standpoint, yet without fear or hatred. I think the Jewish question is no more a social than a religious one. It is a national question which can only be solved by making it a political world question to be discussed and settled by the civilized nations of the world in council. We are a people, one people. We want to lay the foundation stone for the house which will become the refuge of the Jewish nation. Zionism is the return to Judaism, even before the return to the land of Israel. And I'm not quite in agreement with that World Council, because who's going to say who's civilized or not? But anyways, the Reverend used his social connections to introduce Herzl to members of German Royal Society and the Sultan of Turkey during the late 1800s. And this helped lift Herzl's idea of a Jewish national homeland from obscurity into the political discourse among world leaders. The meetings with world powers procured for Herzl by Reverend Heschler. Yeah, I did it again. Herzl and Heschler gave Zionism political legitimacy in the eyes of the world press. Throughout the years, the Reverend also introduced Herzl to Christian clergymen and leaders, and Herzl later invited the Reverend to the First World War. To the First World Zionist Conference as the first Christian Zionist. So, pro-Israel, pro-Jew, pro-Israeli, right? Zion.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's like whenever you're reading throughout history, no matter what country it is, in the 1800s and the early 1900s, it's like if you were going to form a society, it had to be the longest title ever. It was like the longest the title of your organization, like the more like woo. It's like
I can't have that as an acronym anymore. It's too long. It's like 9 letters. It's like
but you notice that like no matter what their like goal was, it's like the longest titles for these organizations. And I don't know at what point they're like, all right, enough. Yeah. 3 words, like max 3 words, 4 maybe, okay, but no more than that.
Yeah, you don't have to ask like what's your group about, like, because it's in the title.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad that they have to give it a title of Zionist, because you can't say Christian, because so many people have portrayed themselves as Christians and done the exact opposite of it. Yeah. Now we have to give it another name because we can't associate with the world, the word Christian. It was like Knights of the Templar and all these other things that are just like completely, Christian is to be a follower of Christ. Mm-hmm. And that can't be a name, it's not a well represented name among the Jewish people,
Right. Well, in Christian Zionist just means like the belief that Israel belongs to the Jews. It was a biblical mandate, this biblical covenant between God and the Jewish people. This is your land forever. And so whether you're Jewish or not, to be a Zionist is to believe the Bible and the first covenant, testament, that that the land belongs to the Jews from the Nile to the Euphrates. So, anyways, yes. 2 more paragraphs and we are done with lesson 7.
Okay, I will try to get this right. Theodor wrote that the Reverend was a likable, sensitive man with a long gray beard of a prophet, and the most unusual person I have met in this movement so far. At the age of 44, Herzl died due to pre-existing medical conditions, in addition to being stressed and overworked. At his bedside, the day before his death, the Reverend was implored by Herzl to, quote, "Greet Palestine for me. I gave my heart's blood for my people." Herzl also urged his fellow Zionists not to forget the contribution the Reverend made to the Zionist movement. Today, due in large part to the Reverend and Theodor Herzl, is known as the father of modern Zionism. Together, he and the Reverend birthed a movement that culminated in the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948, a miracle in history accomplished by God through the vision and steadfast perseverance of a Jew and a Christian working shoulder to shoulder, shoulder to shoulder in pursuit of a single goal.
Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch. Herzl Heschler. Well, if you look, before we move on page 94, here are some three pictures kind of by the spine, or the fold, I guess you could say. The spine's on the outside. It has a picture of the delegates at the First World Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. And then there's a picture of Reverend William Heschler in a Bedouin's outfit, and his beard is quite long. And then the third picture is survivors of Buchenwald concentration camp as they arrive in Haifa in 1945. Buchenwald or whatever you want to call it is the same concentration camp that Jack Vander Geese escaped from in his book With God on Vacation, which is a fantastic read. And I absolutely love World War II autobiographies, not from the enemy's viewpoint, but from survivors' viewpoints. And What's God on Vacation, I like to read it at least once a year, to be honest. It's kind of a short book. If you start it in the morning, you'd probably finish it by night. But that's the same concentration camp that he escaped from when he was like 16 years old. Anyways, we are an hour in or so to our video, but lesson 8 is going to be pretty short. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages technically, and then we've got some maps and a micro history to share. So, okay, learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss Palestine within the context of the Roman Empire. Understand that Ottoman. It's Roman.
Let's cut out the end lesson 7 and we go with a straight face into lesson 8.
Okay, I need to go grab my charger really quick, so let me pause.
Red.
I was trying to get you saying there.
Oh no, brown cow. Ted fed Fred bread, then Fred fed Ted bread.
Are you gonna do the other one?
No, I'll probably mess up.
That's the one that I don't typically mess up, but I don't want to jinx myself either. How many sheets could a sheet slitter slit if a sheet slitter could split sheets?
Yeah.
Try that one. But my favorite new one is Irish wristwatch. Irish. It's like I have to visually see the word and forget the first word so that I could focus on the second word, or else my mouth is like, sure.
Like talking like Sean Connery, like I drown out the corner of your mouth.
Say Irish wristwatch with a Sean Connery accent.
Irish wristwatch. You can actually say it a lot better, I think.
Do it again.
Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch.
Irish wristwatch. It sounds like I'm saying crotch. Okay. And action. Hey, we are now starting lesson 8, Encountering Palestine. In this lesson, our learning objectives, we should be able to discuss Palestine within the context of the Ottoman Empire, understand the relationship between World War I, Zionism, and the Balfour Declaration and explain how the British Mandate for Palestine evolved. Before we begin, pray for a better understanding of the events that led up to the establishment of the State of Israel and a deeper conviction of why an independent state in their ancestral homeland was so critical for the continued survival of the Jewish people. Would you like to pray?
Sure. I was just counting. That was like 4 lines with only one sentence.
One period. One period.
Okay. Father, we thank you for wisdom, guidance, and understanding. We ask that you enlighten us. We ask that you give us more wisdom. We ask that you open our hearts, give us a heart of flesh, and take our hearts of stone, Father. We ask that you help us to be empathetic and no longer apathetic, but empathetic and compassionate towards the Jewish people who hold a covenant with you as we hold a covenant with you also. And we give you all the glory and honor and praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. In our last lesson, we learned about the development of Zionism and the movement for a publicly recognized, legally secured homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. We learned about the Dreyfus affair and how that particularly egregious example of anti-Semitism as a supposedly liberal country was a galvanizing force for Theodor Herzl. We also learned about Aliyah from Eastern Europe, which occurred during the decades of pogroms, conscriptions, and other policies of harassment toward Russian Jews. As we already know, Jewish immigrants to Palestine faced harsh conditions and hostility from some of the Arabs living there, even as they purchased land for their new communities from the Ottoman Empire. Now we're going to explore Palestine in the age of the Ottoman Empire in greater depth, learning more about the people who were living there, the Ottoman Empire itself, and the development of the British Mandate for Palestine. Part 1, and we are on page 96 if you are following along. This sentence is kind of like, what? Palestine was a backwater territory in the Ottoman Empire with a small population. The land was underdeveloped and there was a decided lack of infrastructure. However, there was space and room to grow, making it attractive to Zionists who wished to redeem their ancestral homeland and who had been subject to thousands of years of anti-Semitism. At the turn of the century, the population of Palestine was predominantly Arab, with significant Christian and Jewish minorities. The nationalist ideals of the West had not yet reached the Middle East. The Arabs living in Palestine during the Ottoman Empire period did not have a cohesive identity in the way the Jews did. They did not think of themselves as Palestinian or as Ottomans. They identified as Arabs in ethnic and cultural terms, and their allegiances lay along tribal and familial lines. That's very interesting. I didn't know that myself.
Yeah, so there was no nationalism or whatever the stuff that was going on in Europe. They were completely left untouched.
Page 97, the Ottoman Empire, which existed from 1517 to 1917, controlled large areas of land in Palestine. However, there was a weak central government and a lack, of regional authority within Palestine itself. Combined with significant corruption and high land ownership taxes, people living in Palestine existed essentially as part of a feudal system. The system was characterized by wealthy and absentee landlords who used fellahin, or Arab Muslim tenant farmers, to work the land. Modern agricultural practices were discouraged, and the vast majority of the population was uneducated and impoverished. Fellahin were conscripted to work, and their pay was also subject to high rates of taxation. Even those who could afford afford to own land chose to operate outside the realm of the empire system, choosing not to register property due to a desire to avoid complicated Ottoman laws regarding taxes and land development. These practices often resulted in high debts to moneylenders, further impoverishing the fellaheen. As we've learned previously, there have always been Jews in Palestine. Their population centers were clustered primarily in cities with religious significance, including Jerusalem and Safat, where Jews were the majority. With the arrival of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe during the first and second waves of Aliyah, new towns, farms, and communities were built. Jews purchased land from absentee landlords operating within the Ottoman system. Unfortunately, many fellaheen lost their jobs as Jews took on the new work of farming the lands. However, with Jewish immigration also came new economic opportunities. New cities and towns like Tel Aviv were established. Jewish immigrants brought modern agricultural advances to Palestine, facilitating the draining of swamps, the agricultural development of deserts, and the planting of trees. Jewish immigrants also began developing industry and infrastructure in Palestine, including the establishment of an electrical company. These advancements presented new economic opportunities for the former fellaheen, even as their way of life changed dramatically. Word spread throughout the region, and Arabs from throughout the Greater Ottoman Empire moved to Palestine in search of greater economic opportunity. The Arab population of Palestine doubled between 1917 and 1946. Talk about moving in, being blessed. Deuteronomy 28. You're blessed coming in, you're blessed going out, you're blessed in the city, you're blessed in the field. Everything you set your hands to will be blessed. The produce of the something of your womb and the produce of your land and the beasts. Everything blessed. Hallelujah. Glory to God in the highest. I'll let you take over 98. I'm going to just sit over here and praise and worship in my heart.
In the Did You Know box, it says Christians constituted a large minority within the Ottoman Empire. They, along with the Jews, were known as Dhimmis, or it's Dhimmis, non-Muslims under Muslim rule. Dhimmis, how would you say that? Dhimmis? I don't know. Hold a protected status under Islam and are able to practice their religion, but are also subject to harsh rules and regulations regarding their dress, behavior, and employment. Men also have to pay an additional jizya tax. Jizya.
We're gonna have to Google that.
Yeah. Then we have a couple of pictures from 1909 and 1913 in Tel Aviv.
Literally 4 years.
Yeah, there's guys and desert and sticks and brush, and then next it's a thriving city with tall buildings and walls and
Desert City Street. 1909, 1913. In just 4 years, nothing, barrenness, land, growth and development and infrastructure.
Well, and the Ottoman Empire had been around for 400 years, and it wasn't until the Jews came back to that area that more Arabs started to thrive and move to the area because of economic support and growth. In
400 years of nothingness, and then in 4 years, growth. And also in Deuteronomy 28, it was like, I will cause the blessing to overcome you and overtake you. Like, it literally is going to chase you down, and there's nothing you can do about it, because I'm going to open up the windows of heaven, and it's going to bless you. I'm speaking with a spoon. I don't know why I picked this up.
So it says, think it over. What are your impressions of these photos, which we've said, and what was the result of the Jewish immigration to the land, which we said, and how do these photos compare to modern day Tel Aviv, and what does that progression indicate?
Mm-hmm.
Prosperity, light, success, you know.
Blessings.
What does Gaza look like today? What does Gaza have? You know. You just pay attention to where the reports coming out from actual Gazans, not Hamas, but the Gazans. Anyways, I'll leave that there. So note, the advancements that came with Jewish immigration to Palestine, and Tel Aviv was only a few years old during this time period, yet today it is a modern, economically thriving city in terms of the opportunities offered to those living in the land, Jew and Arab, due to the Jewish innovation and cultivation. To learn more, we can watch Jerusalem, which contains the oldest known footage of Palestine filmed in 1913. The film is in Hebrew, and the 10-minute segment highlights include a train ride from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, to Temple Mount, to religious Jews at the Western Wall, as well as children in a Jewish school and classes at the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design at Hebrew University in Jerusalem at bit.ly/Jerusalem 1913.
That's what we're getting ready to watch. So I'm going to cue it up. We're ready to go. Sweet baby. Okay, let's turn this sideways.
מסילת הברזל יפו ירושלים הוזילה את מחיר המסע לחג הפסח. מחיר הכרטיס להליכה וחזרה במשך 3 ימי חול המועד הוא כעת 2 מג'ידות. דוקטור בוגרשוב מתאר את הנסיעה ברכבת לירושלים. משני צידי הנחל מתרוממים 2 קירות מסולאים. ככל שעולים בהרי יהודה, הסביבה יותר ויותר חרבה. אין כל זכר ליערות שהיו פה לפנים. במדרון מדרגות השומרות על הקרקע לבל ייסחף בזרם הגשם. בצד המסילה נמתח חוט הטלגרף היחיד בין יפו לירושלים. הרכבת מתרוממת ועולה, ואנו מגיעים אל עיר הקודש. ירושלים היא תאוות כל העמים וחמדת כל הארצות, ואין אומה שלא תקעה בתוכה יתד נאמן. רוב התושבים הם יהודים המתפרנסים ממסחר, וחלקם נתמכים מתרומת נדיבי עמנו בחוץ לארץ. מעל כותל הדמעות מתנשא מקום המקדש. הערבים יקראו לו אל-חרם א-שריף, ובמרכזו עומד מסגד עומר. בעמק רפאים גרים בני אירופה העשירים בבתי אבן יפים ונוחים המשקיפים אל העיר העתיקה. ליבה של ירושלים נמצא עדיין בין החומות, מעבר לשער יפו. בערב חג הפסח ממהרים החסידים לצאת במיטב מלבושיהם אל כותל הדמעות. הסמטה הצרה אשר לרגלי אבני הכותל העתיקות וגם המבוא מתמלאים מתפללים, וכל בכיים קורע לבבות ונשמע למרחקים. זוהי מערת הקבורה של רבי שמעון הצדיק. בל"ג בעומר ינהרו לכאן המונים מיושבי עיר הקודש להתפלל על קברו ולערוך הילולה וחג. המלחין צבי אידלסון רשם ביומנו רשמי מסע. מה שממזרח לירושלים, הוא כותב, עושה עליי רושם עז בכל פעם שהוא מתגלה לפניי. נחל קדרון, מי השילוח, יד אבשלום, עמק יהושפט, כל זה הולך ומעביר אותנו לימי הקדומים. מהר המוריה והלאה הולכת ומשתרעת ירושלים של העבר. נדמה לי שעוד רועדת פה רוח העם העברי הקדומה, רוח התנ"ך, והיא מנשבת פה כלפני 3,000 שנה, והיא לוטפת את פניי ומחיה את רוחי. מאות תלמידים של 13 מוסדות החינוך של אגודת העזרה בירושלים יצאו להצטלם לרינוע כשהם לבושים במיטב בגדיהם. אליעזר בן יהודה אמר, אם יש לנו עם קטן המדבר רק עברית ומתהדר ומתגדר בה, הרי חלק גדול מזה אנו חייבים לבתי הספר של העזרה, למוריהם ולקצת תלמידיהם, והחלק הראשי והעיקרי אנו חייבים ליוצר בתי הספר האלה, האדון אפרים ריס כהן. למוסדות החינוך של העזרה הייתה חשיבות רבה, גם בגלל המלחמה נגד המוסרים את ילדיהם לחינוך במיסיון. ועדת ההגנה הצליחה להוציא מבתי הספר האלה כ-120 ילד וילדה ולהעבירם לבתי הספר של העזרה, אבלינה דה רוטשילד ואליאנס. אפרים כהן היה גאה במפעליו באותם הימים. בתי הספר של חברת העזרה עומדים כיום בעצם שגשוגם. רוחו של הזמן החדש מנשבת בארץ ודוחה את צורות החיים הישנות. בתי הספר של העזרה נוצרו ברגע של תמורה היסטורית ועל יסוד השאיפה להתחדשות. בין הצועדים המורים לעברית זוטה, לוי ונחמה קטינסקי, צבי אידלסון חלוץ המוזיקה ודוד ילין שימרוד בקרוב וינהל את מלחמת השפות נגד לימודי הגרמנית במוסדות העזרה. בית הספר למלאכת האומנות בצלאל נמצא במשבר, לאחר שמנהלו פרופסור בוריס שץ נדרש להפריד את ערבוב התחומים שבין בית הספר לאומנות הציור והפיסול לבין המפעל העוסק בעבודות בצלאל העממיות. המוסד האומנותי זקוק לתמיכה, ואינו יכול עוד להישען על בתי המלאכה. סיבת הדבר הוא חסרון קפיטל סובב. אל המוסד הסובל מחוסר הון במזומן נשלח מר אסטרמן מאגודת בצלאל הברלינית כדי לסייע למוסד בניהול העסקיו. רעיון יפה וגדול מונח ביצירתו של הפרופסור שץ, כותב סופר העולם. יש צורך במרכז לאומנות עברית, אך נחוץ לא רק שיפסלו וייציירו תמונות עבריות, אלא לפתח סגנון עברי מיוחד, להבליט את הרוח העברית בכל היצירה האומנותית.
I wish I had English subtitles, but I guess what did you gather from just watching the video?
Oh, well, it was well inhabited after 4 years for sure. Men and women going to school together, young boys and girls going to school together.
That was a lot of boys and girls. Like,
yeah,
that was a massive parade.
We were just talking about the place. It was a desert, and then 4 years they've got a whole train system, going from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to Temple Mount all around, so or some such. So it was just like, wow, okay, cool.
Yeah, great. It's just lots of people, lots of productivity, lots of growth and development, and I mean, just
on school, but they have an Academy of Arts and Design, universities are there,
Yeah, for sure. You didn't get to read very much, so you want to pick back up on page 99?
In the section titled, Who Said That? We're going to guess who the quote is from. So, quote, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and the Persians rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greeks and Romans followed and made a vast noise, and they were gone. Other people have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now and have vanished. The Jew saw them all, survived them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert but aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jews. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? And that was written by Mark Twain concerning the Jews in September 1899. That's cool.
The secret of his mortality is God. Because as we read in our previous first and second video, like if the earth and only when the earth and the moon and the stars no longer remain, that's when, he'll forsake his people and they will no longer exist either. So as long as everything else in this galaxy created by his hand remains, they will be a people.
It's opposite. As long as the Jews remain, so will the moon, the sun, and the stars. And he'll never forsake his people, so they'll never fade away.
Well, I mean, hand in hand, it's like only the end of the world and like creation as we know it will result in the end of the Jewish people. They'll always be around.
It's the opposite.
I know, I'm saying you can change it. You can say, okay, if the Jews no longer remain, the earth and the moon and the stars will no longer remain. And only until the earth, like only if the earth and the moon and the stars didn't remain, they wouldn't remain either. It goes hand in hand. You can do it both ways. like a
No.
reversible t-shirt. You can just turn it inside out.
No, the sign of the end of the world is if the last Jew has left. The last of his covenant people is gone. So if you see the stars starting to fall out of the sky, you know that there are no more of his people left. It's not because of this, that, and the other. It's not interchangeable.
I'm not saying because, I'm saying when, if, and when.
Okay. Part 2, spoils of war. As the Jews in Palestine were building up the territory, World War I waged 1914 to 1918. Jewish Zionists abroad, as well as Jews in Palestine, played a role in the war, and their work, coupled with the shifting alliances and realpolitik of the era, would lead the world closer to the founding of a Jewish state. As Britain fought the Ottoman Empire in the midst of World War I, shifting alliances in the Middle East and the prospect of ending Ottoman dominance in the region prompted Jewish leaders to seek support for the Zionist movement from the British government. The World Zionist Organization, under the leadership of Chaim Weizmann, began to work toward gaining British support of a national home for the Jewish people in their native land. On November 2nd, 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to the Jewish community declaring, and I want to read the start of this actually, there's a photo on the side that says Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. It's addressed, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which have been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. And then it goes on to say, quote, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment of the national home in Palestine for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. And then it goes on to say at the end of the note, I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. And then he signed it at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
This statement was a huge victory for Jewish Zionists, despite the declaration not being as strongly worded as Weizmann would have liked. Given the situation of Jews throughout Europe, and especially in Russia, where they were subject to terrifying and deadly pogroms, the Balfour Declaration had rendered Palestine both a viable refuge for Jews and a promise of creating Jewish life anew. At the same time as they promised the Jews a national home in Palestine, the British were also extending promises to the Arabs about their own national independence. The Sykes-Picot, or Sykes-Picot, I'm not sure if they're saying it in the French word, Agreement of 1916, a secret accord between France and Great Britain, had divided up the Ottoman Empire between their two spheres of influence. The British encouraged the Arabs living under the Ottoman rule to revolt against the Ottomans, thereby tying up Ottoman energy and resources. In return, the British promised an Arab national state or confederation of states. The Sykes-Picot Agreement and the Balfour Declaration did not necessarily negate each other. So they're playing sides there. Everybody gets a... What are these photos of? Okay. There's a photo of Emir Faisal the first, and Chaim Weizmann also wearing an Arab dress as a sign of friendship in Syria. At this time, Faisal was living in Syria and not Iraq, near Iraq. He was a later king of Syria and Iraq in 1919. Indeed, in 1919, Emir Faisal, the emergent leader of the Arabs who had revolted against the Ottomans, signed an agreement with Chaim Weizmann, recognizing that Zionist and Arab wishes for self-determination were not mutually exclusive. Faisal stated that, quote, mindful of the racial kinship and ancient bonds existing between the Arabs and the Jewish people, and realizing that the surest means of working out the consummation of their national aspirations through the closest possible collaboration in the development of the Arab states and Palestine. End quote. The agreement stated that it would fulfill the Balfour Declaration and sought, quote, to encourage and stimulate immigration of Jews into Palestine on a large scale and as quickly as possible to settle Jewish immigrants upon the land through closer settlement and intensive cultivation of the soil, end quote. The Faisal-Weizmann agreement was not fulfilled, and Faisal has stated that his acceptance of the Balfour Declaration would be based on the British fulfilling their promises of an independent Arab state. Unfortunately, this never happened. So they were definitely ready for agreement, coexistence. I wish I could see what this map was. Do you have this vision of the British Mandate of Palestine?
I do not. And it's so blurry at the bottom. You can't really see what the blue and the red kind of stands for.
Yeah, I think it does say the blue is, don't quote me, but this photo credit is at the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
The division of the British Mandate of Palestine. But I'm trying to see what it says the red stands for versus what the blue stands for.
Yeah, the red says Transjordan. And
let me see if I can hold it up on the screen for everybody else who's watching.
Yeah.
Nope, it's totally clear. You got it.
Yeah, it's upside down, but
yeah, as soon as you turn it right side up, you disappear. There you go. So Israel is the blue that we see today, and I'm guessing the red is maybe what they thought they were going to give also to the Jews.
Well, the Arab state, and then the Israeli state. As long as I think Britain fulfilled their promises, they would get this, and Israel could get this, and then they could work and live cohesively. But I want to read this part because I know when we get to reading, these sentences need to be chopped up. But he said, mindful of the racial kinship that's familial, and ancient bonds meaning existing between the Arabs and the Jewish people, and realizing that the surest means of working out the consummation of their national aspirations through the closest possible collaboration in the development of the Arab states and Palestine. So it was to encourage, quote, encourage and stimulate immigration of the Jews into Palestine, an area, on a large scale and as quickly as possible to settle Jewish immigrants on the land through closer settlement and intensive cultivation of the soil, which they did. And that's completely argued against right now. They never, okay, it's right here. This is the plan. This has always been the plan. The plan was already being put forth before this even really came out. Anyway.
Well, and I don't know if you listed his title, but he was later king of Syria and then Iraq in like this picture is of him in 1919, but he was the king of Syria and then Iraq. Right there. Amir Faisal the first.
Like my double chin.
Yeah. So, it says optional further study. Oh, I guess we didn't get to page 101. So his agreement was based on the British's acceptance, basically fulfilling their promises to also he's basically like, we'll form a Jewish state as long as England or the British rule helps fulfill the promises of an independent Arab state as well. So in 1922, The League of Nations granted Great Britain a mandate for Palestine, recognizing the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine. That is a quote. The League of Nations tasked Great Britain with the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. Shortly afterwards, in September of 1922, the League of Nations in Great Britain decided that the Jewish national home would not apply to the area east of the Jordan, which constituted the vast majority of the territory included in the mandate, and which eventually became the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. We'll learn more in our next lesson about the British mandate for Palestine and its impact on the region. So for further study, here's a list of some key players in pre-state Israel. Choose a person or group from the list and create a piece of art, painting, video, song, dance that reflects the hopes, fears, and challenges encountered by the group or individual during this era. And share your project with a study buddy, family member, or friend. So it gives some key players here: Christians living in pre-state Israel, the Arab Fellahim, the Jews living in Jerusalem, Chaim Weizmann, Amir Faisal, or the British. And we've got a quick Balfour Declaration video to watch, and then we'll kind of share some maps to take a look at the Balfour Declaration, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and there is a map of the British mandate of what we were trying to view on page 104. Okay, here we go.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Jews living in the land that had once been known as Israel had been dominated by foreign occupiers for nearly 2,000 years, but they never gave up hope of being free. As Britain fought the Ottoman Empire in the midst of World War I, shifting alliances in the Middle East and the prospect of ending Ottoman dominance in the region prompted Jewish leaders to seek support for the Zionist movement from Britain's government. On November 2, 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to the Jewish community declaring, "His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object." 100 years ago, the Balfour Declaration was the first official step toward establishing the modern state of Israel in the ancient homeland of the Jewish people.
Key word in Arthur Balfour's letter about that is they said that we will use His Majesty's government will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. You call that your best endeavors? Just kind of best endeavors, huh? All right, I'm going to start pulling up my background so we can show some maps. And I believe this first one will be the Balfour Declaration right here. So let me move all the way here. All right. Am I still sharing my screen, or well, I guess you're just seeing me, not actually my screen. Okay. So this is the Balfour Declaration. So I don't know if you can see it very well, but the lines surrounding kind of the orange are dotted lines. It says this is the Zionist organization proposal to the Paris Conference in 1919. The orange that we see here is the British Mandate Zone, 1920 approximately. And then what you see in the solid black line is contemporary Israel right now as it stands. So the British Mandate was going to provide Israel with a much bigger area. And the dotted line, which is way smaller than the orange, was the Zionist organization's proposal So the Zionists were like, okay, just give them this little bit. And the British Mandate, it's like, we'll give them all of this. And then, what they end up having right now is smaller than both of those, which I just find very interesting. Let's switch this. And now we're going to look at the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And that looks like this one, I believe. Yes. So in the really dark orange near Haifa, that is the British sphere, approximately. The light orange is the area of influence for Great Britain, approximately. The white is the international zone. The dark blue is the French sphere. And the light blue is the area of influence for France. This is the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which, if going back, just kind of refresh my brain, that would have been
It was the secret accord between France and Great Britain, which had divided up the Ottoman Empire between their two spheres of influence. This is on page 100 in the second paragraph.
Okay. A lot of plans, nothing happened. Men. I'm just kidding. Put a lady in charge, it'll get done. I joke. Okay, and then this last one is the British Mandate. Here we go. Dark orange is the area separated and closed to Jewish settlement in 1921. And then the white is the British Mandate Zone, which was from 1922 to 1948. And we will be learning about what happened in 1948. Yes,
the map currently shows that they have the Golan Heights and they have the West Bank, which they do not have now, and Gaza, which they're fighting in currently. So all of this is British mandate.
Yeah, and compared to the other maps, it was smaller than the Zionist organization's proposal and smaller than the original British mandated zone. That was in 1920, and so just 2 years later, the British Mandate Zone got even smaller. But the key point here is this whole time, the Jews were like, we don't want to kick people out. We just want to live peacefully together. Just give us a place where we can call home, So, super important. All right. Sorry, my face just got up in here. I'm trying to scoot my chair back to in front of the screen. That is it for lesson number 8. And next time we meet, we'll be going over lesson 9 on page 105, which is titled The Interwar Period. If you haven't, which I'm sure if you made it this far because our videos are so long, you've probably already seen our first videos, because why would you stick around? Except to learn more and to grow in knowledge, or maybe because you are completely against everything that we're saying, but you just want to find something to argue about, and know our side of and point of view. Or you're a supporter of Israel and just want to learn more, go get Kufai's The Israel course and follow along with us. Any closing comments, Katie?
Nope.
Nope.
No, I mean, this is all stuff. I mean, this is all stuff that people can go and find historical in books, not other than the Bible. And they can be like, okay, is Palestine an actual nation? Is it an actual group of people, or is it an area? And what was promised? Who promised it? You know, all these things. So,
Well, and then there's the argument a lot of Muslims and Arabs are using, especially Max, who used to be Muslim and converted to Christianity. He said that he was told by his parents and grandparents that was our land, they stole it from us, and they just cultivated this hatred of Jews in him, and just instill it in their children from such a young age. But if you even look at the Muslim Arabs of the time, they were making agreements with the Jews, like this king of was Faisal. King Faisal was it's like
I'm on board. Let's get them in there. Let's get people integrated as much as possible and have success in the region.
Yeah, as quick as possible. It wasn't just like, yeah, you can move here, I guess. It was like, no, let's get you moved here as quickly as possible, and help start cultivating this land and everything. So Amir Faisal, yeah, king of Syria and then Iraq. So it wasn't like the Jews were like, we're gonna take your land, we're gonna steal it from you and stick it to you and kick you out. It's like, no, we just want to have a place where we can live peacefully, help the growth and the success of the region. And even the Ottomans during the time were oppressing a lot of the Fellahin. So they found work among the Jews and were immigrating because the Jews had immigrated there and made it so prosperous. They're like, work? Yes, please. Thank you very much. I'll come and join you, work shoulder to shoulder. So a lot of these arguments are just stemmed from lies and hatred and
being raised.
Hopefully truth. When the truth comes out, people recognize it and share it and don't just keep it to yourselves. So with that, we will say good night and thank you for watching. We've got one subscriber. Thank you for whoever you are. I'm going to mention you. And one of our videos got 35 views in like a week. So woo woo. More than we thought we would get. But thank you for watching. Have a great evening, night, whatever time it is. It's 1 a.m. here. So love you and praying for you and take care. Bye. Let's get started.
Leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather.
What is the actor who plays in The Office? There was one movie where he just like was standing in front of maybe it was when he was playing in Evan Almighty or whatever it was. He like stands in front of the mirror and he does a little mouth like workout. I forgot what he said. Brown. Oh, or maybe it was Will Ferrell. He was like, brown cow, brown cow, black cow, brown cow. Anyways, lesson 8 is titled Encountering Palestine. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to Katie's face. You should be able to just
speaking the English.
And as much German as we have in our bloodline, like we cannot even get. I think I have a decent pronunciation of some Jewish words better than I have German words. Not that we even knew that we were German until recently. Had more German in our bloodline than we thought. We thought we were mostly English and Scottish and Irish. But there's not much we are not.
Yeah, we have a hard time even saying that. English, Scottish, Irish.
We're gonna have to pull up our like 23andMe like makeup because it's surprising. There's really nothing. If you put out a world map, there's really not a country that we're not represented by. It's like ridiculous.
Love because it's just spread across the globe for our family.
Yeah, I mean, we're like parts, well, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, Asia,
Really.
the Middle East, and even South American. We're like 3 different, Peruvian, Colombian, and something South American. Wow. Okay, so
Stop it.
Yeah.
Off topic, back on topic. Cut.
squirrel. Okay. Yeah. And if I share my screen and you see the time because I'm switching the phone, it's not PM that we're looking at. It's 12 a.m. that we're talking right now. So we got a little bit of the sleepy sillies.